Lauren.
We're back on
We're
Momentum
back.
Now.
It's great to see you. And what excitement today, huh? Isn't this fantastic?
I know. Okay, so I have to do this amazing intro. All right. I'm being transparent. I had to write it down because our guest has so many different accolades. All right. So we are proud to welcome Dr. Juan Rios, who is a leading voice in social work, mental health, and community leadership. He's a professor and chair of social work and public administration at Seton Hall University in New Jersey. And on top of that, he's a licensed clinical social worker, certified sex offender treatment specialist, certified hypnotherapist, EMDR therapist, team CBT therapist, and a certified mental health first aid instructor. And let me not forget, he also holds a certificate in nonprofit leadership from Fordham University. But wait. If that wasn't enough, outside of academia, Dr. Rios runs Rios and Associates Therapeutic Solutions, where he helps individuals and families navigate complex mental health challenges. And I've only scratched the surface, as I said, of his many achievements, but I also want to call out your work and your research, which revolves primarily around trauma-informed care, community healing, and rethinking public safety, especially regarding mental health and policing, which is a topic that has gained Dr. Rios national attention. So again, that was just a little bit. Right. So we're going to find out a whole lot more. But when you look at your full bio, you definitely have superhero status in my book. So welcome, Dr. Juan.
Thank you so much. Love that. First of all, the superhero status, that's big. I don't know if I'm there yet, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
I think you are. We're going to find out.
We're going to find out. But thank you both for having me. I'm really honored and love what you both are doing and what MVP is doing. And I am 110% in support of your mission. And I look forward to having an amazing conversation.
It's all about providing access and opportunities to our constituents and our students and the people that we support. And I know that you've been doing that for years and building inclusive communities. And in your TED Talk, you talked about creating inclusive communities. For those who haven't seen that talk, I'd encourage you to do so. It's fantastic. What do you think what are some actionable steps young professionals can take to foster inclusion and a more inclusive work style within either their place of work or their community or in their day-to-day life?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question, because I think that all of that starts here and here, but also here. And being able to trust our heart, minds, and gut into how we show up as our best selves authentically, right? And that's really where I want to start kind of this conversation, because anytime I talk about my work or things that I've done or what I would like to impart to sort of the future minds of burgeoning leaders, is that I don't show up without a team with me. What I mean by that, I mean, there's always ghosts in this room about my past and who and how they support me into every space. I carry my mother who's lived with schizophrenia. I carry my brother who's currently houseless and homeless and lives with schizophrenia. I carry my father who's passed away, who was addicted to heroin and died of AIDS. I carry my sister who was a teenage mother. I carry, my uncle who was murdered by a police officer. And I carry my own lived experiences of aging out of foster care, and as well as, justice involvement, et cetera. And I think that's important to start when we think of what are the characteristics and how folks show up into the workforce and their best selves, is that so often we meet each other in our space of work where we spend 8 hours, 10 hours a day, but we really don't form authentic relationships. And it doesn't mean that everyone's going to be your best friend. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that regardless of what field you're in, whether you're in marketing or whether you're in leadership or whether in social work or healthcare, your past experiences will inform how you show up, what are you passionate about, and what are the ways in which you navigate relationships. And if we don't do that internal work, then you're going to start seeing that the team, how you build teams, how you succeed in your workforce, really comes with threads of impact of the past that you have not dealt with or you are unconscious about. So knowing ourselves here, and here, our instincts, our hearts, and our minds allow us to create a better balance of logic, compassion, and trusting our inner selves. And I think that those are really the key components that I want to start with and impart when we think of leadership and showing up, because those points right there are everything is centered that we'll be discussing today.
You just shared a ton about yourself in just those 60 seconds, right? And like that's a very rich and complex background in history, right? And there's so many different ways that could have affected you, right? Mm-hmm. And I listed this laundry list of achievements, which is really just your short list, right? But how do you think that complexity of your background, how do you think that motivated you and pushed you in this particular direction for your pursuits? When it could have gone 100 different ways, in some ways not so great.
Yeah, and I also want to say that each of us, like my story is my story, but each of us here, you, Bob, we all have something that we come with. There's a reason why you both have dedicated your time in this way. And it comes from somewhere, a why, a really deep-rooted, sensitive why. And I don't want to discount that because everyone has their story. And knowing your story and destigmatizing shame around it, so we normalize that trauma and vulnerability are not bad words. They're words that inform how we move from this destination, that destination. So like you mentioned just now about how does that inform my why, is it sort of this duality, which one sense it became my purpose when I, lived in, and I mentioned my TED Talk when I talk about going to soup kitchens and being displaced and eating out of garbage cans. That became a why. It became, I don't see myself past the age of 18. I mean, I may be here for a long time. I'll be here for a good time. So I'm going to do the best I can while I'm here and see what leads me, because I saw other people when they went to different directions of criminal involvement or didn't go to school or do these things. I said, there has to be a different way. And that was a drive for me because luckily I'm the youngest. So my brother and my sister were two older examples. And I think the position, I give them all the credit because the position of where I was born helped me have a viewpoint and a vantage point of experiences that they had and said, okay, that didn't work that way, or that didn't work that way. Maybe it could be this. So that's one way in which I'm very fortunate, and I give them all the credit and grace for leading that path for me. This doesn't mean it was a positive path on their end, but by example, I was able to rule out alternatives. But the other piece of it is this concept that we're very familiar with, which is this survivor's guilt. And I also live with that. I live with that duality where this is very much, I'm very driven, and you heard a lot of those certifications. And it doesn't mean those certifications came from a good place. Those certifications came from really a toxic hustle. Okay, I'm going to be honest, because I'm always feeling like I don't belong in a space that it wasn't built for me. And my background, I find very few people who can align with how I've lived and got here. So I'm always trying to validate through certifications that, no, I do. I have a paper here that proves I can do this. Yeah. And it keeps going and going and going and going. But in the counterpart of that toxic hustle, you have to be able to get to a space where this imposter syndrome is reduced. I don't know if it will ever be eliminated, but that you can live with it. Sort of this dark passenger on your journey, if you will. And then the other piece of it is like, I have also this sense of survivor's guilt, being the only one, not just in my family, but amongst all my friends. All of my friendships from growing up, no one graduated, let alone college, or a lot of them aren't here anymore. And we don't have that same relatability. And it hurts that there's times where we just won't have that. So that's that duality. I think it's what you were talking about.
Do you also think that growing up in New Haven,
Mm-hmm.
right, in the vicinity of Yale, where you see such the symbol of achievement, right? And your situation is the complete opposite of that. Do you think that also drove part of that toxic hustle? I mean, you saw outside of, your family, you saw what could be, which in some ways I think could be good because you have a vision of it, but you were so separated from it.
Yeah.
I think that had played a part.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, this duality of like an institution, or not just Ivy League, but university institutions and the communities which they serve, I could name 12 universities in which there's a Yale New Haven relationship that exists. Okay.
Yeah.
Across the country, where there's this institution that's in the wall or gated that had its proximity maybe steps away, but its context and its relatability is millions of miles away. It's their lived experiences. So for me, growing up in New Haven, it was very much clear, like, I knew exactly when I crossed a specific street that I'll get told to go back the other way. Right? And I remember hearing that, seeing that, and being told that. So Yale for me was, there was never I won't say never. It existed within New Haven, but it wasn't New Haven.
That makes sense.
So I wasn't, there was never really a relationship. It was these two worlds, right? Yale owned much of New Haven, and then the other parts was very desperate. The desperation, sense of desperation, like you felt. So if folks who visited New Haven before, you go to Yale and you're like, oh wow, this is so cool. And then you take a left and a right and a left, and you're like, oh my Lord, where are we right now? And it changes very quickly, like this. So that relationship, it wasn't as if I had a connection with the university that was like, oh, you could be this. So no, I wish I did. I wish I did.
Despite the fact that you are a professor and taught at many different universities.
You know what? You might have a point. Karen, maybe you should be a therapist. I think you have it wrong. I think I might want to come with something today. Today, just now, might be the first day I realized that there may have been an unconscious imprinting that was made through proximity, even if it was built on, I don't want to use the word hate, but built on discontentment.
Yeah.
Right. That there may have been something unconscious that was there that said you could or should or be this, right? Maybe.
I'm not trying to take your job, so it's fine. Just
I'll give you my insurance card. That's pretty good. 20 years of therapy. Who knew? One podcast has done it.
But Dr. Juan, don't you think there's times or for individuals that adversity is basically a propellant for success? And what advice do you have for young professionals who have experienced trauma or are experienced, either issues around diversity issues or discrimination issues or adversity issues, just issues in the workplace, issues in their life? What advice do you have for them so they can turn the negative into a positive?
Yeah. One, I think everyone should be in their own work. I think more now than before, normalizing what it means to be in a state of wellness and healing as a continuum is important. Two, the other piece of it is recognizing that there's an aspect of resilience that lives in all of us. And in order for it to grow, you're going to be challenged, right? Like I remember going to church when I was a kid, and the pastor said, "Don't ever pray for what was the word? Temperance, right?" And I was like, "Oh, why?" And because in order for you to have, temperance, or you have to be tried. So these challenges are going to come to you in order for you to move through those spaces of resilience. Nothing. It's part of the byproduct of resilience is being tested and tried. And what's important though is one, our state of community, so we don't feel alone, and two, again the heart, mind, and gut to trust that that there is still this future that I can live and want to live, and don't lose that. That's important.
Do you feel like there's a different relationship now between mental health and families? Like, for instance, my generation, which we won't talk about which one that is. My parents didn't really, mental health was not a word, right? Like you just kind of dealt with it. But, now that we talk about it a lot more. Do you feel that pendulum has shifted, whereas young people can be fully expressive of how they want to deal with their own mental health in a positive or, in positive ways, and that people are making space for that? Or is there still conversation to be had around it?
Still much conversation to be had around it. I firmly believe that because there's still the sense of shame because we haven't yet moved from a state of like, it's not, what's wrong with you, but what has happened to you. Mm-hmm. And often we still have that, what's wrong with you. Mm-hmm. And it's still a conversation, still very much a conversation. And sadly, and I don't want to, kind of like take a left turn here about, technology and emerging technology and how it plays a role into our everyday engagement and how we, go back to Bob's point about resilience and humanity. There's this shift and literally a pinpoint in our sort of human development that's occurring right now that hasn't it's unprecedented, absolutely unprecedented. And we're still throwing at this problem. When I refer to this problem, I mean for this overconsumption of media information, this lack of actual connection. We never in history have we been more connected, but more disconnected. And we don't know what to do with that phenomenon. There's parents don't know what to do. Children don't know what to do. Grandparents don't know what to do. Legislators don't know what to do. There's no books written on, like if you look at our textbooks on psychology and social work, there's no textbook that's going to say that's saying, oh, understanding the humanity and intersection of technology in the modern, 20th century. Like, no, it doesn't exist. And its implication on the collective society and collective psychology. There isn't written yet. Right. And I'm hoping for those who are listening to this that they're like, ooh, I can write that. Right. Like we don't even online dating and our understanding about what dating is in this era. There is very little actual literature, textbook research to teach on how to address what does the phenomenon of online dating and rejection and swiping left, swiping right. And that concept in itself is something that if you don't have a secure ego, it can really be damaging. And you compound that with lack of attachment. You compound that with kind of your own self-esteem and traumas. And what it begins to brew is more loneliness and lack of self-worth. And that's just one phenomenon of dating. So going back to the point of like, are we normalizing, where are we in the discourse of health and wellness with our families? I think there's so much more work to be done. I think we've done a much better job, as you stated, like during previous generations, my generation, which is like, it was like, shut up, suck it up and put your head down and do it.
Stuff it down with Brown. Right. Stuff it down with Brown.
Right. Do what you got to do and don't feel, right? I'm an emotional eater to this day because of, that's just been the concept of which it was. And that's that we got to do better.
So if I'm a person, if I'm a young person today and I'm more self-aware, right, than the average person. But the people around me who may be older, they don't understand my experiences. I'm young. I'm trying to figure out my purpose in life, how to show up authentically. But the spaces that I'm in don't fully allow me to do that. What is your advice to that young person who's trying to just step out there and figure this out?
Yeah, I find your tribe. And because it is an unrealistic expectation that everyone should sort of kowtow to our own needs and wants, and you need to understand me. This is how I am. Like it doesn't exist in the reality of this world. You know, we have to navigate relationships, and not everyone is going to sort of conform to your ideologies, your belief systems, your values, how you view the world. It just does not exist that way. And conflict is not a bad word. Again, another, we should put like a list of bad words. Conflict is not one of them, right? That's not one of them. And it is not about conflict. It's about focusing on repair. That's the key piece of this. When we begin to say, we could disagree. We could see things differently. But the key piece in all of this is how we repair. And that's when you know who your tribe is. Again, it's not about saying, let me find the people who only align with what I'm saying. Let me find the people who only align with my values or my belief system, my political values. That's not it. It's saying, when we have conflict, how do we repair? Are we nasty? Do I call you names? Do I withdraw? Do I shut down? Do I just nod your head and say right, but behind your back, I'm like, shh. I'm not. Right. But when you find people who you repair in a beautiful way with, those are the people you can grow with. And that's the people you find the ability to be more vulnerable and trust. So if it's not in my job, then I could be able to trust them and say, you know what? Can you check me on this? I said this at work when I was doing a presentation. Give me some feedback on that. And you could trust that they're going to hold compassion and accountability together. Mm-hmm. And that's a key piece in it. Finding your tribe does not mean finding people who think like you. It means finding folks who you have conflict with, repair, but hold accountability and love at the same time.
I love that.
Yeah, and that's where the strongest relationships are. Right. When you think about mindfulness and success, how can young professionals integrate day-to-day practices, daily routines to manage stress, enhance productivity, be more mindful, and foster overall well-being?
Yeah. So when we think of mindfulness, and again, that's another word, another kind of more, it's been co-opted in kind of pop culture in a lot of ways. And if we could just simplify it in one way, in one sort of phrase, it's like, being present now, right? Be here now. And that, if we could do more of that, 1% better, our engagements will be different. How we show up to work different. How we show up for ourselves will be different. And that helps us create more of a sense of awareness internally. Like, damn, I woke up this morning and something was off. Be curious about that. What was off? And then you start recognizing that the way I came across to someone, if, Karen's on the subway and I run into her and she kind of brushes up against me, like, how I respond to that, is that more about me or is it more about the moment, right? And oftentimes it's about, I didn't check myself already before I left the house. Or I wasn't attuned into how somebody said something to me in a tone, and maybe I should speak up, but let me be present now. It's the moment of being able to put down my phone and really tune into this conversation 100% and really bring my whole self in at this moment, not just sort of 30%. And, I'm listening to a lecture at 30%. Or for those folks who may be listening to me, us right now, are got their screens down and searching through their emails. Or may be background noise to somebody right now. Yeah. Doing something else, but taking a minute and saying, no, I'm going to be very intentional, be present with my body, be present with my mind, be present with this engagement. And that mindfulness piece really helps with that.
That's so incredibly important what you said about, I mean, even the example that you gave about how you are responding. It took me, for example, a long time to figure that piece out. That most of the time is probably just about me, and to think about it where it's not a negative thought about myself, right? It's just, I may just be in a mood, right? And if I check myself, it actually will prevent other negative conflicts going forward. So it all
100%.
links back together if you are just being present in the moment, understand where your headspace is at, right? And how that reflects on the world. And maybe you won't take something so offensively, or you're giving the other person grace because they can take a moment to recognize that they're not being themselves in this moment, right? Or this is them and you should have attitude with them, right? Like
Right. That's a reality. That's a reality. And also being able to say, I need a moment. It's okay for you to ask for space in order for you to come back into a state of being where it doesn't, you're not spilling your stuff onto someone else. And that is okay. Being able to say, that's really powerful statement. I love what you said. Let me sit with that. Right. Or being able to say, Karen, I know we just started. Can I get 2 minutes just before we begin? I kind of want to center myself before we jump into this meeting. Or starting every meeting in that way. Starting meetings are where let's check in and how are we really showing up today, so we can structure our meeting with some compassion. That it's just not, this is what we need to do, but we're holding, again, love and accountability. Doesn't mean that you're not being accountable. Okay, that's a misconception. We could do both. For those of us who have children, that you have to redirect kids all the time. And sometimes their tears and their cries, it hurts you, but it's done with love in a way that this is done with love, because I don't want you to eat, like my son, if it's up to him, he'll eat candy, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Right. And then we'll cry his eyes out because he won't have dessert, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But guess what? What happens if I give you breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day for the rest of your life? You're going to say, I'm going to be part of your therapy session and say, my dad never set any boundaries with me. He let me eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and now I have, these type of health conditions. The point is that it can be done, right?
Yeah. Imagine if young people learn that in high school, how to manage that conflict and themselves so much earlier, like how that development might change, because that's not taught in school, really. It's just redirection, you're wrong,
right?
Not how you talked about it, right? And that's just something that, we as adults have to learn and practice over and over again. But what if that started earlier?
Yeah, that's such an emotional kind of intelligence. Yes, it's being sort of embedded more into schools in different ways.
That's the work you're doing.
But you said there's folks out there doing it. Right? I'm one of them, definitely one of them. And it also is one, creating communities and spaces where we understand and recognize mental health. We also know that normalizing kind of help seeking, but also building resilience through it's the same ways we do conversation is important. And I think, unfortunately, the word resilience in some spaces is being co-opted to replace mental wellness. And I don't want to, codify those two things and say, well, resilience takes precedence over mental wellness. It's both, right? It's being able to develop tools to help you along the line that best meets sort of how you navigate challenges from day-to-day basis. So mindfulness may be a great way I do it, but if you're neurodivergent and you're trying to meditate, good luck. It's going to be a challenge. It doesn't mean you can't. It means that it may be more of a challenge. So there are other tools in which we can utilize ways of resilience that work for me. but we don't teach ways in how to explore those tools. So I have a knapsack of stuff that keeps me from moving to those extremes of dysregulation. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Forgot that part.
That makes sense. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, no, I'm going to do a pivot, Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Juan. What advice do you have for young professionals that are considering a similar path as yours, whether it's social work or just higher education, pursuing their PhD, whatever it might be? What advice would you give that person who's on the, they're on the fence? Do I go back to school or do I just kick into work mode? Any thoughts around that?
So with the assumption that they want to go to a similar path that I'm currently in, let's say, as you mentioned, higher education, mental health practice, social work. So I'm going to stay in the context of that because I think there's an answer a bit different for different responses because I also have my own thoughts about the future of higher education. But that's a whole other podcast segment in itself. So I'll put a pin in that.
Yeah.
What advice would I give to a person who is looking at sort of wrestling with going on the same trajectory I'm in? Well, I would say that having a transdisciplinary approach to whatever you're doing, like especially around mental health and education, is a very pivotal approach to take. And I'm going to break that down a little bit. So when folks think of social work, people always have this stigma that social work is you do a case management or you're taking away babies. Like, I can't tell you how many times I heard that in my life. That's pretty much like those have been broken down to those two things. What folks don't know is that social work as a profession makes up 76% of all private practitioners. 76%, that means more than psychologists, psychiatrists, LMFTs, LPCs. Most likely, if you're going to see a therapist, it's a 76% chance that they are a social worker, right? Also, social work as a profession, you see it from neonatal units all the way to hospice and everything in between, from government work to healthcare to any aspect of the human experience. Tech, for example, most recently, in the last maybe 10 years, I've been very curious about emerging technology and how it sort of plays a role into the future of humanity, the future of relationships, the future of healthcare. So if you look at social work, as I mentioned earlier, social work is embedded in all of those pieces. But how many social workers do you know that are actively engaged in some form of tech or understanding emerging technology in that way? Or do we teach it? Or is it, it's not. It's not. Business, 76% of us are in private practice. That means that 76% of all folks in private practice are social workers, but do they teach business in social work school? No, right? So I would, social work, if you're ever interested in being in this field, what would really help, or in higher education, teaching it, is that take this and. Okay? Don't just go to school and say, okay, give me the information and teach me how to be a great social worker and learn about engagement and interventions and all these things. That's, of course, you got to know your foundations. What you bring to the table is equally as important as what you're learning in the classroom or what your trajectory of your career. Because what's beautiful now about this day and age in which we're in, thinking about it from an opportunity growth perspective, is that you could really carve your own lane much easier now than before. And that means that if you are someone who loves art, then you could do art and. If you're a person who loves business, you could do business and. If you're a person who is very curious about Programming is programming and, podcasting and. I mean, these are the things that are, communications and. These are the things in which these engagements like today, with the platform you're building, is reaching, creating more impact than a textbook or a classroom professor will ever have. Period. Full stop. Full stop. I mean, I'm gonna give one more example. Art, and I'm gonna stand by this. I'm gonna stand by this statement. Art, whether it's music, visual art, etc., has done more for mental health than any policy around mental health or textbook research around mental health. Full stop. Okay. So if I tell you what songs do you really bring to you, like have you heard that really you gravitated to it and made you cry, you could connect with that. When you see a piece of artwork or you're like, oh my, like you connect with that, right? This is why our ancient ancestors utilized art to tell stories so that we came closer to that lived experience and that connection to this celestial we, or, whatever is greater than us, so that we are reminded of who we are. And that begins to be the first pace so we don't feel this loneliness as a direct combatant towards depression and anxiety. So I would say, please keep in mind that whatever you bring to the table is beautiful, it's important, it's impactful, and we need you. This and that will, I think that would be amazing. I would co-sign that any day, every day for them.
I feel like that's a little bit of a mic drop. You just sold social work, the whole field of social work, and rebranded it.
Nice job. Yeah. Nice job.
I mean, that's another conversation. If I also, and I don't, sorry me to jump in there, Karen. I'm sorry.
No. About you.
If we're talking amongst family here, I also do believe that there's a lot of professions that's going to evolve over the next 30, 40, 50 years. And I think social work as a profession may not look the same in 30, 40, 50 years. Mm-hmm. And the only way it will evolve is if we have folks that are listening here and saying, oh, word, if our society is changing, then of course, human engagement is changing. Of course, social work and social well-being will change. And what will it look like when, we are closer to machine than humans, right? What would it look like when we are terraforming another planet? What would it look like when the rise of climate change and climate refugees and displacement? What would it look like if this asteroid hits, Earth and it wipes out a whole city? I mean, this is real stuff. This isn't sci-fi, right? We're not watching a Marvel film.
Yeah.
This is reality. This is reality, right? This is going to happen. These are things that's in our lifetime. So in 50 years from now, what would a social work profession look like? And it will not be what social work was in 1980s or 1970s during the film Claudine. Like it won't. It has to be different. I mean, those who know. And I think that's going to be a very different profession.
Yeah. I have to throw it in real quick, though. I'm watching this show at Sterling K. Brown, Paradise. I don't know if anybody saw it yet. But long story short is the world is destroyed and 25,000 people were chosen to live underground and form a new society. Anyway, one of the main people that chose the people and is monitoring all the social constructs, right? Is I don't know exact title, but basically that's her job, right? To maintain that social order. So as you talked about terraforming on different planets and things like that, it brought that up, that there's just different ways to engage in this work. So I'm relating it back to television. Sorry about
that. 50 years from now, intergalactic travel might be here. But just a few years from now, it's now actually, we're saying AI change the landscape of all kinds of professions. What are you excited about when you think about new technologies, AI, virtual reality? What excites you the most?
Yeah. So what I'm really curious about is the emergence of quantum computing. Right, quantum computing is here. The challenge has been is that quantum computing is not. Its reliability and accuracy is just bad, right? But with the emergence of the Willow chip, it has changed that. So now we're just waiting for it to scale. That's it. Technology is here. It's just now how do we scale this? And once quantum computing, and again, this is, as you mentioned, it's going to be 2 years. Within the next few years, quantum computing will be part of our everyday conversation. Forget about AI, because AI is only as limited as its, sort of power, hardware, energy, et cetera. We're not going to, if with quantum computing is now more accessible and scalable, then we're not going to need an underground bunker in Iceland to power all of these AI, platforms and programs as they exist. It will be, the power of how much would it take to power all this unlimited energy is going to be reduced. And that way now, whether it's robotics or machinery or brain control interfaces or healthcare and nanotech, biotech, is going to shift. It will shift our aging. It will shift who has access to these things. It will shift our memory, how we store memory. It will shift our transportation, as you mentioned. All those things are going to change, right? So I'm very curious about that. In regards to sort of like the now, where I think we talked about this offline a little bit, which is the future of healthcare, and I stand by this too, is going to be an intersection between AI, psychedelics, and virtual reality. Okay, and I'm not sure if either of you are Marvel fans, but if you are you, Karen?
I am.
Fantastic. So you may have seen Winter Soldier, and the beginning of Winter Soldier is where Iron Man and his character, he is reliving a scene where the last time he saw his parents, he never said goodbye. And he's reliving that moment, and that he was arguing with his parents. They walked out the door, and his parents were killed. And he now in this moment was able to tell them what he wanted to tell them and rewire what he was internalizing in regards to shame, in regards to regret, right? In a different way to say what I needed to say to them before, and that catharsis that's needed. And, this was all part of the opening scene, and when he uses technology of intersection between AI and XR, extended reality. But now, if we know some of the research that sort of is being shown around psychedelics and getting us much, much closer to those experiences in a lived experiential way in our bodies, what could then happen to those, from a neuroplasticity perspective, to make those connections and then solidify them. Now we have some of the techniques like EMDR that where we're using eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy to change those memories. But now you take that and you integrate the technology, you integrate the immersion, you integrate the connectivity that your brain is now open to making these new connections. Then I'm not saying it will replace healthcare professionals. I will say it will be integrated into medicine and will get us a lot faster into healing our past traumas.
Feels like that should be a whole podcast subject.
I know. It's exciting time. Exciting time.
You want me to do my wrap?
Yes, please.
All right. So, Dr. Juan, I wrote some notes about what you said. So here's my quick recap. Normalize trauma and vulnerability. They're not bad words. They just inform how you move from one destination to the next. Recognize your toxic hustle. It's also imposter syndrome, which is just a dark passenger on your journey. So just be aware. There's an aspect of resilience that lives in all of us that needs to be challenged to grow. It's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you. You talk about mental health. Be present now. If you can do more of that, that may change how you show up, maybe different and better. Find your tribe. Everyone will not conform to you, but you can find people that you can trust and work through conflict with. That's paraphrasing. And embrace the power of and.
Mm-hmm. That was beautiful.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that was beautiful, Karen. In the last minute here, Dr. Juan, when you think about all your accomplishments and you think about what you'll be doing over, what fuels you to continue on your journey and driving value for the community and your students and your patients, what is your why? What's fueling all that?
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's what my mom says about my cooking.
It's interesting.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Hopefully it's because it's interestingly good. Maybe it's like
she'll have to chime into that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think my why, it's constantly evolving. But if I was to say a thread of that why has constantly been around really being able, I do what I do for the inner child that I have, which is I want to give that child the world that he would have wanted to live in. And whether it means that I am deconstructing policies on X, or whether I'm showing up for someone in a way I would want to have someone show up for, or if I'm raising a child in a way that I would have to want to be, raised, or if I am looking at abundance and growth in a way that I would want to have that child have been instilled. So a big why for me is that I'm constantly very much trying to be attuned to that person who's still showing up for me, and the child who's there, so I can show up for them and show up for others in creating a world that I would want to have lived in and I would want my children to live in.
Dr. Juan, thank you. Thanks for being part of the podcast and supporting MVP, everything you do for your community and the patients you serve. It's a real inspiration to hang out with you for a bit today. Thank you so much.
Agreed. Thank you, Dr. Juan.